Good news. Washington just passed a major housing bill known as the 21st Century Road to Housing Act, or H.R. 6644. This bill had bipartisan support, passing the Senate 85 to 5 and the House 358 to 32. But the big question is, will it actually make homes more affordable, or is this another headline that sounds better than it actually lives? Because if you're a buyer, a seller, or even a renter, that's the question that matters. And in my view, the answer is this. Yeah, it could help, but mostly over time and certainly not right away. Hi, I'm Frank Spencer, Mr. Chatsworth, and today I want to talk about the housing bill that just came out of the Senate. Because whenever Washington says it's passed a major housing affordability package, people naturally want to know one thing. What does it actually mean in the real world? Fair question. Will it make homes easier to buy? Will it lower prices? Will it lower payments? Will it help renters? Or is this just another political headline that sounds bigger than the practical effect it'll have on everyday families? The bill is being described as one of the most significant bipartisan housing packages in years. And I do think it matters. But I also think it's important to understand how and why it matters, because this is not really a bill that makes housing cheap tomorrow. This is more of a bill that tries to make the system work better over time. And those two, well, they're very different things. For me, the simplest way to understand the bill is this. This is much more of a supply-side housing bill than a payment relief bill. In other words, it's trying to improve affordability mainly by making it easier to build more housing, finance smaller and lower-cost homes, and remove some of the barriers that have slowed down the new supply. And that can help. But here's the kicker. It usually doesn't help overnight. So what the bill is trying to do at its core is it's trying to address one of the biggest problems in American housing. We simply haven't built enough homes. And when supply is tight for too long, prices stay elevated, choices remain limited, and affordability gets worse. So the basic idea behind this bill is, if you want housing to become more affordable, you need to make it easier to produce more housing. Common sense. Now that doesn't mean every part of the bill is perfect, and it certainly doesn't mean the bill guarantees success, but it's clearly the basic theory behind it. The key part of the bill that could affect affordability is that it tries to make it easier to build more housing. This is the most important piece of the puzzle. If more homes can be approved, financed, and built with fewer delays and fewer bottlenecks, that helps the market over time. And if it happens, affordability can and most likely will improve. Not because homes suddenly become cheap, but because buyers have more choices and less pressure competing over too little inventory. That, in my opinion, is the most meaningful long-term part of the bill. Number two, it supports modular and manufactured housing, and got to tell you, this also matters. If the country is serious about affordability, it cannot rely on traditional site-built stick homes. Lower-cost construction methods, modular housing, and manufactured housing all matter if the goal is to bring more attainable housing into the market. That's not glamorous, but I got to tell you, it is practical. And practical is what affordability needs. Third thing I like about this is that it creates room for more small-dollar mortgage access. And this may not sound exciting at first, but I think it's an important part of the package because in many lower cost communities and in far more affordable homes, financing can actually become part of the problem, As smaller mortgage products become easier to support, that could open the doors that are currently harder to unlock. And again, this isn't a quick fix, but potentially it's a meaningful one. Fourth thing I like about it is it puts some limits on large investor activity. The bill takes aim at some large institutional investor activity in the single family space. They buy them in bulk, they rent them out, they cash flow them out. And I want to be careful not to overstate this. I don't think this one feature transforms the housing market by itself, but it does matter as a signal that the tide could be changing. It reflects a growing concern that large investors are competing with families for housing inventory, and that concern is clearly part of the conversation now. Now, here's the part I think people need to hear clearly. Even though I believe this bill matters, and I do not think it creates fast affordability relief for buyers. Why? Because for many buyers today, the biggest short-term problem is still the cost of money. It's the mortgage rates. It's the monthly payment. It's what the payment looks like at today's interest rate, not just what the purchase price says on paper. And this bill does not directly solve that problem. So if someone asks, will the bill make it easier for me to buy a home next month? My answer would be probably not in a dramatic way. But if they ask, could this bill improve affordability over the next several years? If it helps create more supply and more lower cost housing options, then my answer would be yes, it certainly could. Now, if you're a buyer, I think the right takeaway is this. The bill's encouraging. It feels good. But it's not a reason to assume the market suddenly has become easy. It may help create more housing choices over time, and it may support lower cost housing formats. It also may improve some financing pathways. And yes, it may reduce some of the friction that has made housing so hard to produce. All that's positive. But if you're a buyer today, your reality is still going to be shaped by your monthly payment, your interest rate, your cash to close, and the choices you have, the local inventory. So I'd not sit on the sidelines waiting for this bill alone to rescue affordability. Now let's talk about sellers. Some people hear more housing supply and immediately think that sounds like it's a bad thing for sellers. And I don't see it that way, at least not in the near term. What I see is this. Healthy housing markets need enough supply, enough financing access, and enough flexibility in the system to work properly. So if this bill helps produce a healthier housing market over time, that's not automatically bad for sellers. And yes, if supply grows substantially in certain markets, that could eventually create more competition. But I don't see this as a sudden threat in today's market or for today's sellers. I see it more as a long-term structural housing bill than immediate listing competition bill. And if you're a seller, I'd view it as meaningful, thoughtful, well thought out policy, but not something that changes your pricing or selling strategy tomorrow morning. So where do I land on this? I think the bill has merit. I think it's one of the more serious federal efforts in years to address the housing shortage, and I think several parts of it could help affordability over time, especially efforts to support more housing production. We need it. We've been underbuilding it at a catastrophic rate for decades. I hope it brings incentives for local reform, support for modular and manufactured housing, and expanded pathways for smaller mortgages. But I don't think people should confuse that with immediate affordability relief. That's not going to be the case. This is not a homes get cheap next month bill. This is a try to make the system produce more attainable housing over time bill. And in my opinion, that's the honest way to look at it. So if you're wondering whether the new Senate housing bill will help housing affordability, my answer is yes, it has the potential to do that. But mostly through supply, and mostly over time. The real question is not whether the bill passed. The real question is how long will it take before ordinary families actually feel the difference. Now, if you found this helpful, please make sure to like, subscribe, and ring the bell. And I'd love to hear from you in the comments. Do you think this bill will actually improve affordability? Or will the effect be too slow for most families to notice anytime soon? Until next time, I'm Frank Spencer, Mr. Chatsworth, and I'll see you around the neighborhood.